Hello everyone and welcome back. I missed last week because I've been sick, but I'm feeling a lot better now and I wanted to make a video of the books that I did not finish. I used to be the kind of person who would finish a book no matter what, even if I was hating it. But the first book that I ever did not finish that kind of changed my philosophy about whether or not I finish a book was Gullivers Travels. I didn't get past the 13% point of this book because I was so bored. At the time, I had a coworker who said she only read the book because she had to for school and supported me in giving up on the book, so I did. I think this is the kind of book that just might be better in a mini-series format or maybe even as a really nice edition of a physical copy, but I read this one as an ebook and it just had zero appeal for me. Maybe this is the kind of thing that I would get through later in life, and I think I recently read that the Bronte siblings read Gulliver's Travels and were inspired by them, so that gives me a little bit more incentive, but overall I don't have any plans right now to pick this one up again. The next book that I did not finish was A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by James Joyce. I think the reason I was originally attracted to this book is because of the title and because I used to want to be a portrait artist, so those two words kind of sparked my interest, but the book itself did not. It looks like I only made it about 3% into the book, so I knew pretty early on that I did not want to continue, and I was glad that I got a little bit more of an idea of what his writing is like, but it just wasn't for me and not the kind of thing that I would pick up if it wasn't a classic. The next one is The Voyage Out by Virginia Woolf, and I had already read Mrs. Dalloway and didn't really love it, but definitely wanted to read more by Virginia Woolf because of who she is. And this one I actually was enjoying at first and thought it was interesting, but by the time that I got to 30% done with it, I did not care about the characters or what was going to happen, so I gave up. This is one of those books that I was reading as an ebook, and every time I turned the page, the time remaining for reading the book got longer and longer. So I really did not want to take the time to finish it. The next book is A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. This one I got 33% done with before I decided to finish. I didn't feel like anything had happened, and I didn't care about what was happening or any of the characters. A third of the book was not enough to hook me, and there were still about 9 hours remaining in the ebook, so definitely gave up on that one. The next book that I ended up DNFing was A Room with a View by E.M. Forster. I got 28% done with this one before giving up on it. At the time, I felt like it wasn't captivating and that I had read some very similar storylines before. And one reason why I had wanted to read this book is because the movie edition shows up in a Gilmore Girls episode. So maybe I will eventually just watch the movie instead. And if I really like it, maybe then I'll give the book another go. But for now, I do not plan to read it. The next book was The Wreck This Journal, and this is actually one I gave up on more recently, but I started it a long time ago, like a few years ago, and I just wasn't really making progress on it, and I just didn't feel like I was getting much out of it. And when I started it, I was kind of more still in my artist frame of mind, which I don't really associate myself with anymore. So it just didn't really appeal to me. I didn't feel like putting in the effort to do the assignments, and I threw it in the dumpster. The next book on the list is The Big Burn. This is by Timothy Egan, and it's a nonfiction book about some great fires that happened in the area. And this is actually one that I was reading at work at my last job back when we were allowed to read the books that we sold while it was slow, and I just never really made much progress on it and haven't really had the desire to pick it up again, though if each summer continues to be terrible with the widespread wildfires. Maybe I will feel like picking it up and learning about a more historical wildfire. So all the books I've talked about so far, with the exception of the Wreck This Journal, were DNF'd like 4 years or more ago. And then I didn't mark anything as did not finish until more recently. So about a year ago I marked as did not finish All the Single Ladies by Rebecca Traister, and I had started it in late 2016, and then several months went by and I had made barely any progress. And this is one that I had actually won through a Goodreads giveaway, so I really wanted to finish it, but I was not making much progress on the book, and instead of captivating my attention, it made me think about my own life way more than the time I was spending thinking about the book itself and reading the book. So I gave up on it because I decided I just didn't need to read it. Also, right around that time, early 2017, I tried starting Carve the Mark by Veronica Roth because I had enjoyed the Divergent series, especially the first couple books. So I thought it was going to be like the new hit book and wanted to read it, but I didn't get very far in before people started discussing some of the content of the book and how a lot of it came off as racist and ableist and had offended people of color and people who experience chronic pain. And it was said that it just wasn't handled properly in the book. So at that point I decided to just stop reading it because it wasn't that big of a priority for me, and I was only about 50 pages in, so it wasn't that much of a loss for me. And based on the way that Veronica Roth handled it afterwards, where she basically kind of denied everything and tried to write it off, I don't mind skipping this one. I think the next one was actually from the very same month. It just wasn't a good month for new books, and that one was The Chemist by Stephenie Meyer. I really liked The Host by her and was looking forward to a new adult book by the author of Twilight, but I got into this one and it was boring and just explained everything in way too much detail, so nothing was actually happening because you were just learning about things. And right before I stopped reading it, it started to lean towards a love story, which, if it's a book about a strong female character who's off being a badass, I don't necessarily want a romance in there because it doesn't need to also be a romance at the same time. But anyways, I didn't enjoy it, I didn't like it, and it wasn't a quick, fast read like her previous works had been. And then the last book was The Librarian of Auschwitz. This one is written by Antonio Iturbe, and I really wanted to read this book because it sounded so good, and I've read Holocaust books before and had no problem getting through them, but this one, just for whatever reason, it was really hard to read and experience as a reader. And maybe if we were not on the darkest timeline right now, I would have been able to get through it, but then I think there was just also something about the writing that wasn't very captivating, and it just felt a little dry. And I mentioned this a little bit in a previous video, but the story was told by the Auschwitz prisoner it's based on to the author, who writes in Spanish, and then it was translated from Spanish to English. So there was a lot of transition there, and I don't know if anything got lost in translation, but earlier this year I read Night by Elie Wiesel, where the writing is absolutely beautiful and was translated directly from French to English by the author's wife. So it was a lot more direct and personal that way for Night, and I really loved it. So maybe this one I would pick up again, but I don't really plan to at the moment. So looking back over the history of my DNF'd books, a lot of them to start with were classics, and then it ended up turning into even just modern books, a lot of YA books that I just couldn't get into. And maybe if I had seen a movie adaptation or something of the classics that I really loved, then I could get through the book. But on their own, these books just didn't appeal to me. So if you've read any of these books, I would definitely like to know what you thought of them, since I didn't think they were worth getting through for the most part. And I'd also like to hear what's the most popular book that you decided not to finish. As always, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.